Hi, everyone. This is Catherine Hausrath. I'm an attorney for the Natural Resource Damage Program. And thank you for joining us for our first advisory council meeting by Zoom. I'm stepping in for the staff role that normally would be filled by Harley Harris or Doug Martin. They both could not attend because of family reasons. And so before I turn it over to Bill Rosbeck, our chair, I just wanted to go through some of quickly the logistical pieces of this meeting. Just like an in-person meeting, Bill Rosbeck, the chair, will run the meeting and with myself and then our NRDP moderator assisting. All of our members, all AC members or the public who would like to make a comment have to raise their hands and be recognized by Bill as well as by our NRDP moderator. The instructions on how to raise your hand were included in the meeting materials, and they are different if you're participating by the Zoom app or on your computer, or if you're participating just by phone. Our NRDP moderator will unmute people after they have been recognized by our chair. And you should announce your first and your last name before speaking so that we can appropriately prepare the meeting minutes. The voting will occur by the NRDP moderator unmuting each AC member one at a time and asking them to state their vote. And as I get through this logistical meeting slide, we will go through and make sure that she can properly identify each one of our AC council members. And we will have each name identified that's not visible. If you have not been recognized by both our chair, by Bill, and by our NRDP staff member and unmuted and you start talking, we won't be able to hear you. And so it's very important that we follow this process. And then I just wanted to note again that this meeting will be recorded. So if we could quickly go through our participants and make sure that they are all clear. So we have Bill and Raylyn, and then if we could go through, let's see,
hey, Catherine,
just quickly.
This is Miranda, the moderator. I think it's just going to be easiest if we ask all of the just the voting AC members to raise their hand, and then I will unmute you one by one and ask you who you are so I can get your name noted so I know who you are on the list. Would that be
great?
Easiest?
I think that's perfect.
Okay. So all voting AC members, please raise your hand and I'll go through the list so I can get your names.
Well, this is Bill. I'm here.
Thank you, Bill. I've got your name already down.
And this is Jim Davison. You have me down?
Okay, Jim, it looks like your name shows up perfectly well, so thank you.
Okay.
Let's see. I believe I just unmuted Kay, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, your name shows up, so thank you. Maureen, I'm assuming that's you. It says Maureen, so.
Yes, it's Maureen Connor.
Perfect, thank you. Is this Maggie?
It is, hello.
Hello. I think we have more, that was the only ones that raised their hand. I believe there's more people on though.
I see Mick waiting. I see Mick waiting.
Oh, he was already in there, but I guess he got moved out. So the guest, it just says it's a phone number. It's 470 or the last three. Who is this?
This is Jackie Lavelle, and Zoom is being blocked by my firewall for the government. So unfortunately, I can only participate by phone.
Okay, so that should be fine, Jackie, that you're participating by phone. Shouldn't be a problem.
Great, thank you. I will mute myself.
Thank you. It does look like Doug has a question or a comment. I'm not sure. I'll unmute him.
Yeah, this is Doug Martin. I'm just listening in. I do see Sue's out there and Jim Cambridge is out there on phone, as well as Mick. And I don't know, Mick may not have heard to raise his hand. He might have gotten knocked off. Those are the other 3 voting members that I see out there that didn't raise their hand.
Okay, thank you. We can ask again. So if you're an AC member and you haven't raised your hand already to be recognized, will you please do so now? So the name on this one just says Mary. I'm assuming that's Mary Price.
Oh, yes, I forgot Mary.
Hi there. Yes, it's Mary Price.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
You got to get Sue. Bill, ask for Sue. Look at the fucking list.
Jim is waiting.
Okay.
Jim is waiting.
So can we, let's see. The only remaining person I believe that we haven't called is Sue Peterson. Are we missing?
Catherine, it looks like I do see Sue down here at the
Oh, right.
bottom of the list. So I don't know if she didn't hear us, but I do see her name, unless there's a different Sue Peterson that got on. So I think we're good with AC members if we want to go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I'll turn this over to Bill now, just like we would in an in-person meeting, and I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, this is Bill. Thank you all for participating in this experiment, and let's all have some patience in making sure it happens. First thing is, just by way of introduction, I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Maggie Schmidt. She's a new member of our voting CFAC. She is from Deer Lodge, the Deer Lodge area, and she has been, she's a ranch manager, and previously she was involved in the management of the Clark Fork Coalition Ranch, which we all know about. So I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Maggie. Thank you very much for agreeing to be a part of this organization. Okay, so with that in mind, then we will, our first item of on the agenda is the CFWEP update and budget action item. And I understand that Shannon will be making an initial presentation, and then Raylyn from CFWEP itself will also participate. Is that correct?
This is Shannon, and that is correct.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. I'm giving you the floor.
Wonderful, thank you. So I hope everybody had a chance to review these meeting overview bullet points here that are up on the slide. As we go through these slides today, I will be referencing what slide number I'm on. So the meeting overview bullets are on slide number 1. So as Chairman Rosbeck mentioned, I'm Shannon Gilski. I'm the NRDP Administrative Specialist. And today I'm going to be going over the CFWEP funding. After my presentation, we'll be also going over the Garrity Mountain WMA Stumptown edition, and Greg Mullen from NRDP will be taking over that portion of our meeting today. Advancing to slide number 3, so the Clark Fork Watershed Education Program is what we have in front of us today to start with. Slide number 4. So I'm going to start things off with a little background about CFWEP. Then I'm going to move on to highlighting some of this proposed scope of work and budget for their contract fiscal year covering 2021 and 2022. I'll conclude, and then I will walk through our future funding for Clark Fork Watershed Education Program, and then discuss some of CFWEP's program accomplishments, and then turn it over to Raylyn Brandel, who will be going over CFWEP's accomplishments, what they're going to be working on in the future, and some of the really impressive work that they've done and will continue to do. Then once Raylyn's done with her portion, be turned back over to NRDP for us to make our staff recommendation, and then we will have the AC vote for the fiscal years 2021 and 2022 for CFWEP's funding and scope of work. Advancing to slide number 5 here. So CFWEP, they are a really great organization, and their mission statement, as taken from their website, is to foster environmental stewardship and scientific decision-making through place-based learning and direct experiences. So as it applies to the NRDP contract, that means they provide sustainable, hands-on, science-based education to children in the Upper Clark Fork River Basin watershed. I've had the privilege to go out into the field with Raylyn and her fellow scientists and learn about things such as macroinvertebrates, water quality, and riparian assessment. I've always learned a lot when I've gone out into the field with them, and I would encourage any of you, if you're ever looking for a good volunteer opportunity, when we are through the COVID-19 pandemic, hopefully you can get out there and see what Raylyn and her team are doing and the great education they're providing. So CFWEP targets school teachers, and they receive professional development in addition to going out in the field with the kids. They also provide this professional development to teachers, so that those teachers can then go back to their schools, implement that programming, even show other teachers some of the great hands-on experiential learning that they're doing. So with the education program, NRDP had started the education fund back in fiscal year 2014 per the 2012 process plan addendum. And this allowed CFWEP to have its own fund. And so therefore CFWEP it earns its own interest, it's in its own fund, and we provide updates on that fund specifically. It used to be under the Upper Clark Fork River Basin Fund, and like I said, in fiscal year 2014, the education fund is now its own fund. Just a little reminder for those of you who may not have known that, or just a refresh for those who were around during that time. Another refresh is that the contracts are for a 2-year period, and so this 2-year period we're looking at is for fiscal year 21 and 22. The contracts require AC and TRC approval. So once we have that AC vote, and we know, and it goes to the TRC. So advancing to slide number 6, CFWEP provided their scope of work in draft to me to review, and I'm here in front of you today to just kind of run through the highlights. So CFWEP, as I mentioned before, delivers restoration education programming, and they do this by having 4 classroom sessions and a full day field trip for students in grades 5 through 8. They serve roughly 18 districts and up to 25 elementary and middle schools in the upper Clark Fork River Basin. These schools include those in Deer Lodge, Granite, Lewis and Clark, Powell, Silverbow, and Missoula counties. Advancing to slide number 7 here. CFWEP also provides beaver mimicry high school programming for Butte High School and the Webster Alternative School. This was a pilot program that they developed during their last contract period, and they were successful in getting that off the ground and implemented, and they did that in working with the Butte School District in Montana Tech. So CFWEP is really good about partnerships and collaboration, and really excited to see that the beaver mimicry is going to continue to be a part of their scope of work. As for their Missoula and Milltown component, CFWEP has a continuation of classroom and field program implementation. And so they take out fifth graders at 9 Missoula County Public Schools, 1 Bonner School, and 1 Clinton School. So they take those students out, and it's great because that extends over into that Missoula and Milltown area as well. Another component of CFWEP is their Bird's Eye View education program. And this is the 3rd section of their contract. And this involves a summer program operated by their partners at the University of Montana, in which at least 2 songbird banding stations and field trips to osprey nest locations are offered each summer. I'm sure all of you have seen the osprey cams, and there's some really cool social media and information out there about the Bird's Eye View education program and their osprey nests. And I'm sure Raylan will be talking a little bit more about that in her presentation, but super impressive work. Moving on to slide number 8 here. So written into the scope of work for the NRDP and CFWEP contract is that NRDP funding must account for no more than 50% of the total CFWEP budget. And I just like to remind folks of that and how CFWEP is funded. So going into the budget a little bit more, let's take a look at the Butte CFWEP program. And so basically, I should back up a second here and say that CFWEP's budget is broken into 2 sections, the Butte and the Missoula budget pieces. And so on the Butte side of things, there weren't a whole lot of changes at all. The one change was there was a cost of living increase of 2.5%. Then there was an update. The education outreach coordinator position will be replaced with the public outreach coordinator position. That position for the public outreach coordinator is yet to be filled, but they're just changing some of their internal structure to meet the needs of their program. And then to kind of summarize what that budget looks like for the Butte section, they're requesting $318,340 for fiscal year 21 and $323,225 for fiscal year 22. So that's a combined total of $641,565. Now moving on to the Missoula section of the budget. They also did not have any substantial changes to their scope of work or budget. They did move some salary between staff working on the contract. And then they're requesting $203,081 for fiscal year 21. And for fiscal year 22, they're requesting that same amount. So the combined total is $406,161. Advancing to slide 9 here. So to give you an overall layout of the budget, I wanted to provide you with this table here. So for fiscal year 21, the total contract ask amount is $521,420. This is actually a very small decrease from fiscal year 20 budget amount. You can see it's a decrease of 0.2%. For fiscal year 2022, CFWEP is asking for $526,306. This represents a 0.9% increase. And that is just very slight for that 2.5% cost of living adjustment I mentioned earlier. So combined between the 2 fiscal years, the contract ask amount is $1,044,390. For comparison, CFWEP's fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20 contract ask amount was $1,044,390. Excuse me, that was their, when I mentioned that, the 1,044,390 was their fiscal year 20 and 19 totals. Fiscal year 21 and 22 was $1,047,726. Sorry for that error there, folks. The bolded amount is the amount they're asking for today. The other amount is just for reference for what their previous contract amount was. So advancing to slide number 10 here. As I mentioned at the beginning of our presentations, the Clark Fork Watershed Education Program has the education fund. It's its own fund within the SABRE system here at NRDP. And we always try to provide a fund balance and let you guys know kind of where things stand. So as of April 15th, that fund had, you know, roughly $1.3 million in it. They have $269,000 remaining on their current contract. Their requested amount is that $1,047,726. And so if we look at this, if they were to fully expend their ask amount and their current amount remaining on fiscal year 19 and 20 contract, that would only leave $22,600 in the fund. CFWEP has been really good about not exhausting their ask amount. They are continually finding ways to, you know, ask school districts to help with paying for field trips, for bus, you know, the cost of the buses. CFWEP has also been applying for numerous grants and outside funding that Raylan will go into detail about, but nevertheless, we need to have the conversation about what the future funding for CFWEP and the education fund looks like. So I want to give you AC members a heads up that in the fall of 2020, so this fall, NRDP will bring forward its recommendation for a vote on future funding for CFWEP. There are some funds in the unencumbered Upper Clark Fork River Basin Fund under the grants allocation. And so looking at that as a source of funding for CFWEP past fiscal year 2022, since there is a small amount remaining in their fund, you know, if they are to exhaust all of their contract amounts. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Raylan Brandel. She is the Clark Fork Watershed Education Programs Director. She has recently won an impressive award, and she has really been carrying the program to some wonderful successes, and she's got some great plans for the future. And so I'm really excited to have you guys hear some of her updates and plans. And so with that, we're going to have the slides turn over to Raylan's presentation. So bear with us if it takes just a second for that to come up onto the slide, or onto the screen, excuse me.
Okay, can everybody see my slides? This is Raylan Brandel, thank you. Can you see my slides? This is Raylan.
Yes, Raylan, this is Shannon, and I can see your slides.
Okay, thank you. I apologize, I was kind of clunky there. Welcome to Zoom land, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this odd and interesting new way of doing business, I suppose. Thank you, Shannon, very much for your overview. I appreciate that. It was nice to hear it heard from you. I like that. It's new for me to hear it that way. So. As Shannon had said, our mission is to foster environmental stewardship and scientific decision-making through place-based learning and direct experiences. But I'd like to remind the council that this really was your call to action for us. You had made the investments in doing the restoration for the entire Clark Fork River system, and you asked us to be the people who would help you inspire the next generation of stewards who would take care of those investments. We have done that work in earnest and have really been growing and trying to spread this love for the last 15 years or more now. So moving on to slide 2, these are, oops, excuse me, these are some of the quotes that we have about our program. And my favorite quote is really from our students, that this is the funnest thing I've ever done in school. Now, perhaps we might need to talk about grammar and talk about it being more fun, but it is the funnest thing I've ever done in school, from our 6th graders in Lincoln, which I loved that. We all take seriously the science and stewardship aspects of this programming and have been dedicated to that mission since the very beginning. So today, I hope to really walk you through what we've been able to accomplish, not only in the last 2 years, but also going back to 2005, when we had some of our beginning first settled contracts from all of you. Moving on to slide 3, we do have some staff changes in the CFWEP Butte area. We've been, we had Dr. Arlene Alvarado vacate the education coordinator position in December, and then Abby Peltema had left her field coordinator position in June of last year. So both of those changeovers were heartfelt, but we've been able to replace our one field coordinator position with Gretchen, who is incredible. We are very excited to welcome her. She has a long history of background in geology and also in mining, and then transitioned into education and has recently been teaching abroad, and she is coming back to Butte to be here and be part of our team. As Shannon had mentioned, we're going to leave the former education coordinator position open at this time. We've made that as a strategic decision as a staff team, for both to conserve funds in our fund, and secondly, to also think about what it is that we need in that position. As we are transitioning into this world of being online and digital offerings, we're thinking that a public education coordinator might be more appropriate. We also welcomed Rachel Neal from the Big Sky Watershed Corps to our team in January, and then we have our student intern Tommy Dolan still with us. He's one of our students that started with us at a fly fishing camp at age of 12 and now is at Montana Tech. Moving over to Missoula, our Missoula staff team remains the same, with Dr. Eric Green, Megan Feeling, and Dalit Gusio heading up everything. But we also welcomed Carly Okrish as our Watershed Corps member over there. And Carly is the daughter of Dr. Chad Okrish, who sits on the Butte Natural Resource Council team. So some of you may also know Dr. Okrish. So anyway, it's great to have that legacy being fulfilled over there as well. Moving on to slide 5, orienting all of you again back to who do we serve? Well, it's really teachers, students, and our community. So we learned really quickly that we needed to have teachers on board with us if we were going to create that legacy of environmental stewards. And as we've grown and matured, we've learned that our community also needs us, that some misconceptions root for a long time, and it's hard to get those misconceptions out. So we think about our programming as being early, often, and always. Moving on to slide 6, these are some photos of the various programs that we offer. Sorry about that. The 5-day watershed science program is the flagship program that you all funded for us. It's the 4 days of in-class and then 1 day on a field trip. That has spurred on many of these other programs that support and enhance what we're able to offer in that week of programming, including our fly fishing camp that is a week long for approximately 30 students, our cleanup blacktail stream days, our community service learning events, our stormwater art and education, and our phage discovery programming for students. Moving on to slide 7, we also include watershed tours that are for a variety of people who come to Butte and to the Clark Fork watershed to learn about the restoration. With these tours include people from all over the world, all walks of life, and all age groups. We are continuing with our authentic research for students and beaver mimicry program, and I'm proud to say that we were able to partnership with Watershed Restoration Coalition, and we have another beaver mimicry site that will be opening this summer, in which we'll be able to include our Anaconda and Deer Lodge students in those authentic research experiences over summertime. Perhaps not this summer, given the restrictions we have on field work, but likely next summer that program will be running full steam. Our Trout in the Classroom program and our watershed days are rather exclusive to the Blackfoot watershed schools, and they involve a deep a deep dive into learning about trout and specifically about bull trout, and then include watershed days where we bring all the little schools together. Our teacher professional development programs have been wildly successful and are rolling throughout the state now. And then moving over to things that are very specific to our Missoula team, we have our Osprey education program, the Bird's Eye View Songbird education program, their watershed science programming. They also provide field trips for other school groups, not just the watershed science education pieces, and then their community education pieces. I think that Dr. Green has given many public lectures recently and has been traveling and now Zooming everywhere to bring webinars and great information about the restoration and specifically about osprey health to the community. Slide 10, specifically to our tribal education and outreach, our Missoula team picked up the mantle to provide that outreach to the schools. And specifically, they're working in Ronan, Arlee, and then we're scheduled to be in Charlotte this spring. The Charlotte visit was canceled due to COVID-19 things. We also have several teachers, one in Dixon and one in Ronan, who are involved in our teacher PD programs. Dixon is hosting our Wings Over Water program that Dr. Green heads up with his partners. And then in Ronan, Bill Stockton is one of my teacher leaders who is actually providing teacher professional development through our Montana Partnership, our MPRES program. All total, with just tribal students for the last contract period, we reached 261 students up there. In addition, our Indigenous traditional place names are part of our 5-day curriculum for all of the classrooms that we serve. Moving on to slide 11, or actually slide 10, my numbers are off. I wanted to reflect for you since the beginning of our program, which we consider 2005 as the hard start to CFWEP. We did have some small grants and some pilot funding before 2005, but the hard start is 2005. And compare that to this grant cycle. So let me walk through this grant cycle, and I want to note that we gave our numbers through December of 2019, and our intention was to update those, today or the day before as we were finishing up our outreach to the communities in the spring. However, given the fact that we've been shut down since March, these numbers have changed very little, so I didn't bother my communications coordinator who's on maternity leave to get this updated for me. But into the 2018-2020, we served 5,870 students. And I'd like to note that we're required per the contract deliverables to serve 2,000 students per year. So that would be a total of 4,000 students. So we were far exceeding that deliverable, and we would have probably been closer to, we've definitely been over the 6,000 students had we provided our spring services. We trained 42 teachers in this last contract period, and that only includes training delivered by the CFWEP staff. I'm not counting training delivered by my MPRES teacher leaders, such as Bill Stockton. They've been doing a lot of online classwork and delivering watershed science and science methods online, and that cohort of teachers that they've been providing service for is incredible. A large volume of numbers there. 30,629 student contact hours served in 21 communities. And this last contract was kind of a banner year for us, or banner 2 years for us, in that collectively we have received 6 national and regional awards. And those awards were pretty prestigious, the national awards especially. And I really have to applaud my staff team and all of our partners, because people have done some incredible work that's now being recognized. Transitioning over to the right side of the screen, really since the beginning, or since that hard start in 2005, we've served over 64,000 students, trained 773 teachers, provided 218,890 contact hours, served 35 Montana communities, and have won a total of 12 national and regional awards. Moving on to slide 11, I'd like to show the growth of the watershed programming. So if we start looking from 2007 and 8 all the way to 2018-19, You can see just in the line graph the growth. The blue line represents our students served exclusively with NRD funding, and the green line represents our total number of students served, and that's with our NRD funding, and I just wrote NIH funding, our National Institute of Health grant, because that's our largest other student outreach grant. But this green line does include all the other little smaller grants that we've provided service with. So starting in the beginning, around 2007, we started collecting our data. We had 1,488 students served, growing to 3,296 students with just NRD funding. As we added in match funding through that National Institute of Health grant and those other small contracts, we were able to grow to serving 4,059 students. Of course, the difference between these two lines are roughly 1,000 students, or just shy of 1,000 students, in terms of how many more students we've been able to add with our match funding. One of the things to note here is you notice this uptick that starts in that 2015-16 era. This is when we brought Dalit Gusio on full time at the Missoula end of the watershed. And she grew the Missoula program from just serving a couple of schools in Missoula to serving the 9 elementary schools in Missoula. So she definitely was a huge contributor in making us be able to be visible in all of the Missoula schools. This peak is representing a year that we hosted the Montana Folk Festival, and we hosted both the folk life and family areas for the folk festival. And so we had a lot more students that we served in that year because of that outreach effort. I should also note that the way that we count students served is the amount of service that we're providing needs to be longer than at 1 hour, and that it is focused on our core deliverables of education, of environmental education, restoration, and science related to watersheds, or science related to the phage discovery in the case of these students. What I want to point out there is we're asked to do a lot of things in our communities that we call them one-offs, where maybe we are, working at a parent night for the middle school, or we are hosting a booth at a local watershed festival that, we see a student for maybe 10 minutes. So these numbers represent a significant amount of hours and staff effort, and definitely have an outcome related to education. Moving on to slide 12, our watershed core member Rachel is a wonderful whiz at GIS and making GIFs for us. So this just shows how we've been reaching into the communities since 2012. And so as the GIF populates, you can see that in students served and the density of those students, our watershed counties are the most densely served counties. And then as we brought on that National Institute of Health grant, we start to really cover the state. And so you see Fallon County represented by Baker, Montana, and Lincoln County represented by Libby, Montana. And those teachers came through to us from that NIH grant. And then now I'm proud to say that both of those counties are also asking for watershed science programming and looking to expand what they're doing in their classes to be more experiential and place-based and watershed related. Pointing out Park County for a minute here, that is one of the examples of teachers coming through our professional development and then replicating the CFWEP program. And so the program in Park County at Livingston School District is called Watershed Warriors. And it's pretty much an exact replica of what we do with our students, except that it's happening after school, and it is considered an extracurricular. So that model has been really wonderful for us to watch grow. We don't necessarily provide anything more than support and encouragement at this point. There's no fiscal investment for us there. Moving on to slide 13, this is the outreach with our teachers served overlaid on those counties and the students served there again, so you can look at it in a static image. But our teachers served, you can see our greatest concentration of teachers remains in the watershed districts or the watershed counties. But our teachers served are starting to include all of this area as well. We're getting a lot more reservation teachers participating with us as well through Bill's outreach and his efforts to be specific to Indian education for all. Moving on to slide 14. We like to think of the NRD program as being the first pebble that was dropped in the great big pond of environmental ed for Montana. And your funding has spurred and leveraged many more programs that have provided a lot of incredible education opportunities for students in the state. And like I said, it's just a ripple effect. We love that you have been able to be our stable leg of our funding stool, which has enabled us to do a lot more work that we probably otherwise would not have been able to do. So moving on to slide 15. This is really a static image of that ripple effect, but again, you are the heart of our programming. And we've been able to spin off these other programs that have been incredibly important to our state and to the core message and the core mission of creating environmental stewards. I'm proud to say that from our partnership with Montana Office of Public Instruction, CFWEP is a preferred provider for teacher professional development in the state. We've been asked to ramp up our online offerings in this COVID-19 crisis and are currently supporting quite a few teachers online right now. Dr. Green has developed the Wings Over Water program, which is a National Science Foundation funded program for teacher professional development related to ospreys. And he is including teachers from around the world in that program now, including a large cohort of teachers from our watershed and from our areas. Our National Institute of Health grant is our largest teacher PD piece. We were renewed for another 5 years of that grant. And then we've been asked by Butte Silver Bow to provide our stormwater education here in this county, and then to provide the community education and outreach related to the Berkeley Pit remedy. And that's been quite a tall order. I would have you know how difficult that has been, but we've redesigned the Pit Watch education site and all of the signage, and I'm proud of the work that we've done there. And then our Winter Wings program, our Cleanup Blacktail Stream, and our Southwest Montana Fly Fishing Camp are some examples. Also to note, we have been working with interns at the University of Montana for several years, and our interns provide the education in the classroom with the Missoula area students. And DeLete has been able to take that program from being kind of ad hoc to being a formal part of the University of Montana's offerings for their students. She offers credit for that class that the students take, and it is part of the Davidson's Honor College. And so students in the education program there can take an honors course delivered by CFWEP staff. Moving on to slide 16, just to focus on PD. Although we've expanded to cover the state, the largest concentration of teachers still remains in the Clark Fork watershed. So out of our 773 teachers, 85% are still Clark Fork teachers and 15% are from other Montana teachers. I think this is a reflection of the fact that our Clark Fork teachers are, number one, very engaged with the curriculum, and number two, they trust us. They believe that they know that what we're going to deliver will be of high quality. On slide 17, I'll break down our matching funds for this upcoming contract period. As we've discussed in previous meetings, our match has not always been hard cash match, meaning that if it costs $1 to run the program, we have 50 cents from an organization and 50 cents from you. Rather, our match has been more about program expansion and allowing us to keep people employed. However, for this budget, I thought I would break down things that most closely align to hard cash match to the program, and they have the asterisks here. And then I'll come back to the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation bullet after we go through this, but essentially the grants that are above the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation are matched from the Butte side, and then below that are matched from the Missoula side. Collectively, we have matched $440,875. I call this in the bank money. It has either been awarded or is currently on process to the NRD budget that we are requesting for 2021. And that our total operating budget would be $962,295, with approximately 54.19% coming from NRD. There is some funds that are still hanging out there that we're waiting at, so we can be closer to that 50% match. For the next fiscal for 21-22, we have hard cash or hard match of $359,971, which is a 59% share from NRD. And typically with our grants, we're running about a year ahead. So that is not unusual for us to be coming with that 60%, and then we come closer into being 50% by the next year. Moving on to slide 18, this is what we have applied for that is still outstanding. So we have 67,745 that is still outstanding for 2021 and 59,000 for 21-22. The largest share of that is coming from an EPA grant that we applied for. And then we have these three foundation grants that we've applied for. We were denied 3 foundation grants for 20 and 22, one from Murdoch, one from Pisces Foundation, and one from Steele Reese. And the thing that I would like to point out here with those 3 foundation requests, we are strategically trying to move away from exclusively public funding, such as grants and contracts, to having a more balanced portfolio of funding, including funding from our from private foundations. When we approached both Murdoch and Pisces, they said that because we were so dependent on public funds, they didn't consider us a good risk at this time, and they wanted to see us move our needle at least 5 to 10%, and then they would consider coming back in to provide some funding for us. And we will continue to have that conversation and do that work with them as we get things moving here. However, as our Steele Reese funding was coming up, they notified us that not only did they want to wait to fund us, they were also pulling back funds because they were trying to look at what tiny, small rural communities might need for COVID-19 relief funds. That translated also to the other foundations in Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation. You probably saw that they also had pulled most of their funds and applied them to COVID-19 relief. They announced to us and let us know that we should apply after July to them. Northwestern Energy Foundation also did the same thing. They left our $2,500 request out there, and they said they would do their best to get that $2,500 local request, but weren't sure what was going to be happening with them. Additionally, we had been speaking with Atlantic Richfield about them partnering with us to provide and sponsor some of our events. They too pulled back their funding until the COVID-19 relief or COVID-19 issues were abated. So moving on to slide 19, this is just another look at that leveraging piece. I liked the static image too, so I wanted to use both of them. But since 2005, you can see how far we've grown and how much of a ripple you've all helped to create in our communities, in our state. Moving on to slide 20, last time I presented to you, we had our article in press and we had been accepted. We're going through the second round of editing, but we weren't fully published yet. But we are now 100% fully published, and our journal article was published in January of 2019. And then there's the listing of the awards that you can refer to later that we got in 2019, or in this last contract period. Moving on to slide 21, as we're preparing for the spend down of our funds and looking beyond 2022, the CFWEP team with all of our partners, we have spent the last year preparing our philanthropy pieces, preparing our private funding pieces. And one of the things that we have done is to look at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so part of the work that the leadership team has done is to really drill down into these areas and think about where we need to be working. With our weaknesses, our volunteer leadership is pretty limited to the science realm, and we need to look at recruiting volunteers as part of our leadership team who can help open doors to funding opportunities as well, who think strategically in businesses, not just in science. We've talked about our one-legged funding stool, that we need some diversification here. A big weakness is we don't have fundraising capacity or time, nor do we have fundraising funds. So I can't pay a fundraiser to help us get our fundraising plan developed, and neither do we have that capacity in our staff team. So we will be addressing this weakness as we go forward here. I added the COVID-19 threat just the other day before I sent the slides out to all of you, because this is a new world order for us. To how do we teach in our traditional way? How do we continue to offer our offerings and make them as equally as powerful as they have been in person? We have also learned that our national funding sources in science and education are vulnerable right now. The federal government is pulling back funds, and we don't know what that's going to look like in the next year. Our private foundations have been reluctant to replace funding for current projects. And then I told you about they want to see a 10% shift in our funding portfolio. And then, of course, as the economy downturn happens, it limits philanthropy for sure. Strengths for CFWEP, definitely we continue to have this strength in sharing science and making it approachable and usable for people, not just scientists. Creating stewards and getting our kids out there and getting them to care about this environment. Evaluating our efficacy, we have long-term data that we can look at. We are working on a program or a efficacy study out of Missoula that's a follow-up study, looking at what our 6th graders remember from their 5th grade experience. We've been nationally recognized. We are great at supporting teachers, and our Missoula collaboration has definitely leveraged a lot more work than just Butte could have done on its own. And certainly bringing on the Osprey program and the Bird's Eye View education program was enriching for all of CFWEP. Opportunities that we see is that our programs are a pipeline into STEM and to the technological age, and we can get kids into college. We have increased community education opportunities. There's a lot of interest in our mercury levels in Osprey and Osprey in general. We have opportunities for corporate sponsorship, individual philanthropy, and then of course new mission related special events and fundraising. We will be working on all of these things and addressing these things in the next 2 years and working to move things out of weaknesses into opportunities and strengths. Moving on to slide 22, our next steps for funding diversification. We will reapply for that challenge grant that we were looking at with Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation when the time is better. And that challenge grant would be $50,000 to them, and then we would be challenged to raise an additional $50,000 to match their grant. Continuing to recruit our volunteer leadership. We'll continue to solicit our corporate and individual contributions and continue seeking our private foundation funding. I was out looking just recently at what private foundations are recommending to their grantees, and kind of across the board the same story that our local foundations were discussing. If you're not asking for money about COVID-19 relief, they want you to wait. So our plans are ready to launch, but we recognize that the current fiscal environment will be challenging. At this time, we are going to keep that staff slot open, and that is mostly to conserve funding for better times. And then also, since both of my field coordinators are now grounded, so to speak, they have a lot more time to develop curriculum and work on delivery of online courses as well. So they will be kind of transitioning back to what that position duties might have been. Slide 23, I wanted you to have a pie graph look at what the CFWEP fundraising structure looks like. This is just a brainstorming look, but roughly we'd say if it costs us $200,000 to do our program here in Butte, and it's usually Butte, Anaconda, Deer Lodge, if it costs $200,000, $100,000 would be coming from NRD. We'd get that $50,000 challenge grant, and then the other 25 slices would come from individual and corporate sponsorship. So that's just the breakout for our own brainstorming and for us to think about as we move forward. On slide 24, Doug asked me to talk about some of the things that were canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We were able to complete all of our fall watershed programming, our phages, and our rural and ultra-rural trout in the classroom programming, and Missoula's fall watershed science programming. As we transitioned into the spring, the Missoula team was able to complete programming for Clinton and Bonner, but had to cancel some of the other spring field trips that were planned there. We missed one trout in the classroom program to Lincoln, and then we canceled 11 other classes and events for our spring watershed education programming, affecting approximately 1,300 students in 8 communities. In the springtime, the Butte team does most of our travel. So this is when we see, Phillipsburg and those sort of areas. So quite a few students were missed this spring. Our plans, as we've reached out to teachers and kind of kept everything on hold, waiting to see what schools might be doing, our plans are for the fall and next spring to catch up those students that we missed. So we don't intend to just leave them hanging and not see them. So Chris Doyle has promised me he will work double shifts next spring to catch up those students. So for example, in Deer Lodge, we missed the Deer Lodge outreach this spring. We would see both the 7th and 8th grade students in Deer Lodge next spring, should we be able to do so. Slide 25. Our next steps, the way we're trying to strategically position ourselves is we're thinking about what could possibly be how school is operated next fall. We are creating our digital offerings. Our teacher PD has moved to online courses through the OPI Learning Hub. We've been really pushing on community education and outreach through media, through Facebook and Instagram. If you don't follow us on Facebook, please do. It's kind of fun out there. We're continuing development of our partnership with Watershed Restoration Coalition and the Clark Fork Coalition Ranch, and developing some new citizen science curriculum. We have an ongoing art campaign that's going on right now that we launched on Earth Day called Restored Spaces. We're asking people to get out in the Clark Fork all the way from Butte to Missoula and capture their impression of things that have been restored. And so we're collecting those art pieces, and that campaign will start to go live here as soon as we get things juried and ready for that. Our Cubs Day is shifted to the socially distanced cleanup day, launching May 6th through May 25th. We've been pushing that people just get out and clean up and post their pictures of the things that they brought to us. We've already had one person, Lou Parrott, who is actually the originator of Cubs Day, has already cleaned and posted. So we're excited about what that could be. We have dual track planning for our summer so that it could be both in-person or remote learning. Our banding at the Bird's Eye View Education Program banding songbird stations and the osprey stations will continue, but it won't be offered to the public. However, what we will be doing there is taking video and offering digitized video offerings, and hopefully building entire modules that will go with the banding and what the scientists are doing. So all of these things strengthen CFWEP, because in the future we'll have these things available for teachers to use in their communities and in professional development. And if we can't get to a community, then the materials are there to be used by those teachers. So all in all, I don't think any of these steps are going to harm us. They're only going to help us and help us learn and grow and get even better. So moving on to page 25 or 26, these are just some examples of those community education materials. And those will be appearing on CFWEP's Facebook page. I just wanted you to have a look at what they look like. On page 27, that's the Earth Day event with the Restored Spaces contest. That was what it looked like on CFWEP. On page 28, here's our socially distanced Cubs event. This flyer went out in everybody's water bill, and then everything is also being hosted on the Butte Chamber of Commerce website and through our other partners. We'll be appearing, having some time on the radio discussing the cleanup, the socially distanced cleanup, and then of course through Facebook and Instagram. Moving on to page 29, that's all I have to say. But I do want to thank the council for your long-standing supporting of our programming. You have definitely ensured the legacy of a clean and healthy environment, and for stewards of this environment to be well-informed and active. So with that, I think I turn it back over. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is Bill.
Okay.
Do we have any questions or comments from anybody on the council? And if so, Mary Price, I see, has raised her hand. So Miranda, can you take care of that?
Bill, I think Shannon has one more thing to present on before we go to questions.
Okay, I didn't see that. So go ahead, Shannon.
No problem. Thanks, Bill. So to conclude the portion of the CFWEP presentation, we'd just like to provide you with NRDP staff recommendation. NRDP recommends funding CFWEP for fiscal years 2021 and 2022 for a total of $1,047,726. And so with that, Chairman Rosbeck, if you are fine, we can certainly turn it over to questions.
Yeah, we'll start, excuse me, what I want to do is start with questions from the council.
Shannon, do you want to put the slide back up so the council could see that?
Certainly. I'm sorry, it was on my screen here, but I failed to share it. Let me just work on that real quick. I apologize.
Okay. I see the first hand raised is Mary Price, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Thank you. Is my computer audio working? Can everybody hear me?
I
Yes.
can hear you, Mary.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I just wanted to acknowledge the great work the CFWEP is doing. Some time ago, I had asked CFWEP to do everything they could to include tribal students and teachers of the Flathead Reservation. And I just want to acknowledge that I think they've really stepped up to that request. And it's exciting to see their work ripple out to other reservations in Montana. And I really appreciate CFWEP's effort to include tribal students in this really great program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. It looks like Jackie has a question next, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute Jackie. Jackie, it doesn't look like it's going to allow me to unmute you on the one that you've raised your hand. Are you on your phone as well? If you are, can you raise your hand on your phone? Okay, there we go. Jackie, you're unmuted now.
Thank you. I had to jerry rig it, so I'm watching on the screen, but I'm talking on the phone. So thank you for unmuting me. I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. I think that you guys do great work, and when the kids come here for field trips, it's always a great time, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And I also appreciate the fact that you recognize getting permits with the Park Service is part of the process. We've really enjoyed working with you, and we think you do good work for the kids. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie. Mary, it looks like your hand is raised again, so I'm going to unmute you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was a operator error.
Oh, okay. It doesn't look like anybody else from the council has their hand raised, Bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we will turn to, is there any council discussion before I turn to asking for public comment? Actually, what do we need to do before we do that? Let me go back to, this is a discussion we had. Let's start all over. Do we have a motion? I think we need to have a motion on the floor before we ask for public comment. Do you have a motion to approve the staff recommendation for funding?
Bill, it looks like Kay Eccleston has her hand raised. Kay?
Kay Eccleston. Bill, I would like to recommend that the council approve that funding for CFWEP for fiscal years 2021 and 22 in the amount of $1,047,726.
Thank you. Do we have, thank you very much, Kay. Do we have a second?
Bill, it looks like Maureen has raised her hand. Maureen, go ahead.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, Maureen.
Bill, I don't, if you're talking, your sound's not on again for some reason.
Okay, the mute and the unmuting, I have to get a little better at. Given that we have a motion on the floor, is there any discussion from advisory council members regarding the motion before I turn it over to public comment?
Bill, it looks like Mick has a comment or question. Mick, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is this $1 million coming out of the $4 million that we allocated in 2014? Hello?
Hey, Mick.
Yeah.
This is Shannon. Chairman Rosbeck, is it okay for me to proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay. So Mick, the education fund was set up in 2014 with the $4 million, yes. And so the amount remaining was that 1.3 million that I provided in my presentation as of April 15th. That was that fund balance.
So this money is coming out of that fund?
That's correct. Yep, it is not coming out of the Upper Clark Fork River Basin Fund as the 4 million was moved to its own fund, this education fund that had the balance of 4 million in fiscal year 14 and now is down to 1.3 million.
Okay, thank you. That's I wasn't sure. Thanks.
Of course.
Do we have any other comments from the council?
Bill, it looks like Maureen has a comment. Maureen, go ahead.
Thank you. I just kind of looking ahead, I guess it would be nice to hear from CFWEP on how the finances are going sometime this fall, maybe as we get through this dramatic change in process that we're going through. With the virus, I mean.
That certainly sounds like a good idea. Ray Lynn or Shannon, maybe we can think about scheduling something for a fall meeting.
Chairman Rosbeck, this is Shannon. And yes, that is definitely going to be on our agenda this fall to discuss future funding. So thanks for that question, Maureen.
Okay, any other questions from any member of the council? Okay, so let me ask if there's any public comment for members of the public regarding the motion that's on the floor to approve funding for CFWEP.
I don't see any hands raised, but I do believe there was one written public comment that Catherine was going to read.
Right, yep. Seeing no live public comment, I will read we received one comment from Butte Silver Bow, and it provides, on behalf of the Butte Silver Bow Superfund Division, please accept our letter of support for the Clark Fork Watershed Education Program. The multifaceted CFWEP is a partner of the Butte Silver Bow Superfund Program, and its work benefits our community and those along the Upper Clark Fork in a very important way. CFWEP's strength is its understanding of the complexities of remedy and restoration within the Upper Clark Fork River watershed and crafting relatable, accessible learning opportunities for kids and adults throughout the region. Each year, CFWEP facilitates place-based learning through field trips to restored sites, watershed tours, and science-based camps, including the annual Cleanup Blacktail Creek Day, Cubs Day in Butte. During this impressive event, over 300 elementary students worked to remove garbage and debris from Blacktail and Silver Bow Creeks, which are headwaters to the Clark Fork. The youngest members of our community literally dipped their feet in the Upper Clark Fork waters as kids to learn about historic issues, present challenges, and the power they possess to make a lasting impact upon our watershed. CFWEP's approach to education generates uniquely informed, mindful caretakers of our environment. In the long term, Butte and the entire Upper Clark Fork River watershed will benefit from this generation of kids transformed by CFWEP into stewards of the restored areas we cherish today. Please keep this profound impact in mind as you consider continued funding of this holistically valuable education program. And that, again, is from Butte Silver Bow.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate it. So I think we're at the point then to hold the vote. Miranda, do you want to go through our council voting members, please?
Yep, I can do that. I'm just gonna, I have a list here, so I'm just gonna start with that. I think the easiest way is gonna be if I have everyone, or I'll call your name and then have you raise your hand, because I'm having a hard time finding people in this list of people that are on the call. So Jacqueline, could I have you raise your hand so I can unmute you for your vote? And again, Jacqueline, I'll have to have you raise your hand on the phone so that I can unmute your mic that you're able to speak on. Okay, thank you. Jackie, go ahead.
I vote in favor.
Okay, thank you. Mary Price, could I have you raise your hand next? Okay, Mary, go ahead.
I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Next is Maggie Schmidt. Okay, Maggie, go ahead.
I vote in favor.
Okay, thank you. I think next is Kay. Okay, Kay, go ahead.
I vote in favor of the motion.
Okay, thank you. Next on my list is Jim Davidson. Jim, go ahead.
This is Jim Davison, and I vote yes.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Next, I have Jim Cambage. And I don't know if did we get Jim Cambage on this call?
I do not see him on there, Miranda.
Okay, I will move on then to Mick Ringsack. Okay, Mick, go ahead.
I vote yes.
Okay, thank you, Mick. Sue Peterson. I know Sue's on the call. Sue, do you, it looks like you may have signed in. Sue, if you're on your phone, if you dial *9, it will allow you to raise your hand. Okay, now I'm not sure there's two people with their hand raised now that are phone numbers. I'm gonna unmute this, it ends in 897. So this 897 number.
This is Sue Peterson. I vote in favor.
Oh, okay, thank you, Sue.
Yeah, thank you.
Miranda, do you want to unmute the other person to make sure it's not Jim Cambage?
Yes, I will do that. So the person that's phone number ends in 519, I'm going to unmute you now if you could tell me who you are.
Yes, this is Jim Cambage. I vote yes.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Maureen is next. Maureen, if you could raise your hand for your vote. Thank you. Go ahead, Maureen.
This is Maureen Connor, and I vote in favor of the motion.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. And then Bill, you are the last to vote.
I vote strongly in favor.
Okay, perfect. So then I think the motion carries and we can, I think, move on then, Bill, is that correct?
That's correct. The motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the presentation regarding the Stumptown addition to the Garrity Mountain Wildlife Management Area. And this is an action item, and Greg Mullen from NRDP staff will summarize the project. Greg, are you there and ready?
I am there and ready, Bill.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay. So Shannon, we'll get the next slide up. Slide number 13 will be up in a minute. while we're waiting for Shannon to do that, again, I'm Greg Mullen, environmental specialist with the program. Okay, there's the first slide. Thank you, Shannon. I'm happy to present this exciting project. I have a total of 12 slides to give, and 4 maps in the slides. So I decided to start the slide presentation with this photograph. In the background is Mount Hagen. The 600-acre parcel is near Anaconda, about 1.5 miles away. Hopefully, most of you on the listening to this presentation saw the video that Martin Balukas with Fish, Wildlife and Parks prepared for us last week. I thought it was a great video, and I thank Martin not only for that video, but for all the help he's done making this project a success. Fish, Wildlife and Parks did a lot of the due diligence and for this project, so very exciting project. So with that, Shannon, I'll move to the next slide, number 14, I believe. So this, the benefits of this project, it definitely meets the terrestrial restoration plan, the goals of the plan. There's a replacement project, replacing injured terrestrial wildlife resources and protecting the lands through public acquisitions. We have a lot of direct restoration type projects that we've spent tens of millions on the upland injured areas and Silbo Creek and the Clark Fork River. This happens to be a replacement project, which definitely meets the goals of our restoration plan, conserving high priority habitats that maintain landscape connectivity, gaining access for wildlife related recreation use, and purchasing large tracts of land that have multiple resource benefits. All are highlighted in our restoration plan and our highlighted goals that fit the plan very well. Shannon, slide 15, please. Some of the other benefits for this project, as I quickly mentioned, it's only 1.5 miles from Anaconda, so it's quite close. Kids can ride their bikes from Anaconda down to this great property, which has almost 1 mile of Warner Springs Creek, and along that mile is 80 acres of fantastic river habitat. Really beautiful place that you saw if you saw the video. And the tour, approximately half the council went on the tour that we had on Monday. It has big game winter range adjacent to, obviously, to Fish, Wildlife and Park land, since it's called the addition to the Garrity Mountain Wildlife Management Area. Replacement project close to the proximity of the injured areas, i.e. Injured wildlife habitat due to the smelter, which is only 4 or 5 miles away. And a considerable component of our original lawsuit. Fish, Wildlife and Parks will manage this property, and they will pay taxes on this property. That's always a question about, and that's how Fish, Wildlife and Parks' normal procedure is to pay taxes on the property. The total cost is $1.74 million. Of that, 1.465 is being asked for from Fish, Wildlife and Parks by NRDP. The other contributors are $100,000 from Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, who first approached Fish, Wildlife and Parks about this project. And Fish, Wildlife and Parks was able to get $100,000 from Habitat Montana and another $75,000 from Montana Fish and Wildlife Conservation Trust. Next slide, number 16. So as I said, I have 4 different maps that I'm going to show this area. As you can see from this map, it's only 1.5 miles. The property is only 1.5 miles from Anaconda. Next slide, number 17. This close-up of the property shows the fantastic winter range grassland, the conifer areas, the 11%, the 80 acres that are along the 7.7 miles of Warner Springs Creek, that riparian area there. So with that, I'll go to the next slide. When we were on the tour on Monday, several folks are asking how this project relates to Garrity Mountain Addition as a whole, and some of the other projects that we funded over the past couple of years. As you know, we call this an addition to the Garrity Mountain Wildlife Management Area. So last year, if you remember, if you look on the left slide of the screen, 2019 was a smaller 154-acre parcel that we added on to the main Garrity Mountain property that was purchased with in 2000 with NRD funds. And then on the far right of the map, you can see the 2015 620-acre parcel that was added on at that point in time, and then the 220 right above that is the area that we're looking at now. So I wanted to show this slide so you can see it in respect to the existing wildlife management area. I just quickly want to say that when the original 2000 property was purchased, along with a bunch of Forest Service land with a lot of federal funding, a lot of these areas that are more developable were not part of the original purchase, because the concern at that time was they didn't want these parcels to kind of increase the value of those lands. So these lands, although very appropriate to be added to the wildlife management area, weren't part of it back then. So that's how they fit in now, and they fit in quite well. So there are lands that weren't on the table, if you would, that were owned at the time. Next slide, please. Number 19. Martin Blucas with Fish Island Parks put this picture together just the other day. And quickly, what I want to show here is that several advisory council members, Jim Davison, Maureen, and Maggie, all asked, the price seems a little on the high side. And what I want to show and depict from this map is that over half the 600 acres is developable. And these outlined areas shows the lands that are less than 25% slope, so you could have a septic system on there for a development. So that's the purpose of this slide, just to kind of outline the reason that the appraisal price was $2,900 per acre is because a considerable amount of the property is developed. Next slide, number 20. So again, as I mentioned, we NRDP have been working closely with Fish Island Parks on this project, and we shared our public comment period with Fish Island Parks as well. And that public comment period ran from November 6th to December 11th of last year. The adjacent landowners were all notified by Fish Island Parks at that time about this public comment period. And with that, the next slide, please, Shannon, 21. Most of the comments were supportive. We had 18 comments altogether, including a public hearing that I attended with Fish Wildlife Parks back in December. Quickly, I'll talk about these some of the main points. If you went through your material for this meeting, the complete list of the comments are one of the attachments. The property has many recreational opportunities ranging from hunting and fishing to mountain biking and wildlife viewing. Acquiring this parcel would open fishing access to Warm Springs Creek, which has been closed in this area for years. Great piece of property to add to the existing WMA. It not only will add to the hunting opportunities in the area, but has some fishing as well. Looks like a win-win in all areas for the public to enjoy. Nice area with access to the creek where grandkids can go fishing. Next slide, number 22, please. Also, there was comments about acquiring this parcel would secure calving grounds and an important nursery area for elk. There was a few non-supportive comments. I'll read one of those. I support the land being accessible for use by the public, but if you are just buying another piece of land to put a lock on the gate, I will not support that. What the commenter is referring to here is that Fish Island Parks will close the area to the south of Stumptown Road between, as they usually do in the WMAs, between December 15th and May 15th. The area along Warm Springs Creek itself, the 80 acres there, that will be open year-round. Next slide, please, Shannon. 22, I believe it is. So here's our funding recommendation. We recommend funding of this project for $1.545 million, 1.465,600 for the land, and also Fish and Parks asked us if we could add $80,000 for maintenance for the project. So we only have one funding condition on this project, and that's that NRDP and Fish and Parks approve and agree on the closing land documents. So next slide, and the last slide. Bill, that's our summary.
Thank you. So are there any questions from the council on this project? Miranda, I think we have two.
Yep, sorry, I forgot to unmute my mic. It looks like Maureen has raised her hand first. So Maureen, go ahead.
Hello, council and members of the public. This is Maureen Connor, and I just wanted to, it's really more of a comment because I asked a lot of questions on the field trip, but for the council, this is, in this area, this is the, I think, it sounds kind of funny, but the nicest piece of ground we've looked at. It's remarkably flat. On Greg's first slide, there's a gigantic meadow up there, just up a very easy ridge to get up, which I was able to do with my new knee. But it's quite interesting piece of property because it's not all lodgepole, and there's quite a tree variety, a giant meadow that has some conifer encroachment in it, but it's really very nice up there. So in terms of non-hunting recreation, this will be, if it were accessible to the public, this will be a place that people are going to want to go on horseback rides or walks, because it's gets into some nice mountainous country, but in a really flat way. So the access is quite good. So I definitely support this purchase. I agree it's a little expensive, but I can see why, because it's developable in a different way. It's one of the pieces in this area where you could put a lot of development, because there are several big chunks of relatively flattish land there. So I guess I did have one question on the purchase of this. If this proposal were to be recommended and approved by the state, is there and this is I think a lawyer question, is there some kind of caveat on it that the property remains in conservation lands of some sort if the proposed owner, which would be FWP, were to change direction in some way? Is there a way to preserve it for conservation? That's the question.
So your question is, how would this is Catherine Hausrath, I apologize, attorney for NRDP. Just to make sure I understand your question, it's whether if FWP were to dispose of it, what would be the restrictions on disposing of it?
Sure. I mean, I guess if it's a conservation property, when it's transacted, it seems like it should, to me, it seems like it should stay a conservation property, even if they had to dispose of it for some unknown reason.
Right. So what we have done in the past with FWP is that we have required in our agreements with them that if for whatever reason property were disposed of, it would either remain for the conservation purposes or the money would be repaid. And so I have not talked to Greg and Doug specifically about the structure of this transaction, but I would assume that we would put a similar requirement into, I mean, because the consent decree requires something along those lines. So.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, it looks like Mick Ringsack has a comment or question next. So Mick, go ahead.
Thank you. Is there any chance you could turn on the videos for the discussion here, just to the board members? Be nice to see everybody.
Mick, we're not doing video because of the amount of bandwidth it requires. It sometimes messes up the call. So we're not able to do video at this time.
All right, well, I think we should be. I have several questions, but first, Greg, when did we authorize payment to buy that last parcel for $19,000 up on the north end? I don't remember doing that.
The governor approved that project last year. I believe it's June or July.
But when did it come before the council for that small parcel? I remember the big one that we did in 17, but I don't remember discussing that one at all.
The small one was at, I believe it was a January or February advisory council meeting, and if I remember correctly, I think you may have been out.
Well, that's when I had my surgery. Okay. All right. I didn't remember that one. Well, I have great concern about doing this. We've already spent $7,100,000 on Garrity Mountain. And, you know, restoration trumps all of this replacement of lost opportunities. And there's 10,000 acres up there now that we've bought. We don't need another 640. And when you talk about lost recreational opportunities, or, you know, this is not the place to do it. I don't know how many people will use it, but you got 33,000 people in Butte in the first mile of the creek that would like to see that creek go through. And it's not going to happen if there's not participation from this fund. And they've paid for a study now, they being EPA and CTEC here in Butte. And if completing a river, Silverboat Creek, that will flow through town is done in the same time we do the remediation that's going to be required by the CD, it would cost $12 million to put in the creek. If it is done separately, it's a $20 to $22 million project. So if you look back and you look at the CD, when we look at the original board resolution, it said we will spend no money in Butte Area 1 for restoration until the CD is signed. And we did that because we wanted to combine restoration with reclamation. Now that the CD is going to be fine, and there is a great project that services more people than any of the other acquisitions we've done. And we're going to not be able to do that because we're spending money buying up land that's west of Anaconda, and you say it's a beautiful area. 40% of it you're never going to build on, 60% of you might. But if you look at Anaconda and the way that community is actually growing compared to Butte, the only place Anaconda can grow is going west up Highway 2, and that area is ideal for expansion out of the community, and you still have that 40% that's part of the other 60,000 acres. So is it nice to spend money for replacement of lost resources? Yes. What is the highest value of it? Then no, that money needs to go to that first mile in Butte that has not been touched. We haven't spent one thin dime in Butte Area 1 for restoration, not one. And then we'll go back to our restoration guidelines that you fellas did, land acquisition proposals. The detrimental aspects of putting privately owned lands into public ownership outweigh the benefits derived from public natural resources derived from the project. That's your language back in 2009 when you did the application reviews. And if you sit down and think whether you're going to put this in public hands or whether you're going to fix and restore the first mile of the creek, what has the greater value? And it is no doubt to me that spending money here is detrimental to getting something done upstream. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Okay, I'll quickly address that if I could, Bill. I guess I'll start by saying that, you know, this Anaconda was injured as well per our lawsuit, and this parcel of land is very close to Anaconda. And as far as spending money in Butte, the Parrot Tailings is going to be the most expensive restoration project we ever had.
That's remediation. That's not restoration.
Well, EPA is not doing it, and per the definition of restoration, if remedy is not going to do something, then it's restoration. So we're spending $36 million there. We also spent over $140 million on Silbo Creek, you know, right there, you know, right outside of Butte, and
that's from Blacktail and the confluence down to the ponds, Greg. That is not in Butte Area 1.
But that whole area is in Butte Area 1, is part of this consent decree, and there are monies that are being earmarked for Blacktail Creek, for that lower area.
Blacktail Creek, that is not the headwaters of Silver Bull Creek, and that is not Butte Area 1. The only reason this suit was ever settled and we ever got the money was because of the loss of the groundwater in Butte, Montana. And 80% of the reason that you got the money you got was because of what occurred in Butte Area 1 and Butte proper. And these other things that we've done, replacement of the lost groundwater and resources, was the major reason they won the suit.
Well, I respectfully disagree.
The money went to the water plant and to bring the water in from the big hole has nothing to do with restoring the first mile of the creek. Nothing.
The law allows us to spend money on replacement efforts, and we spent $75 million in Butte replacing lost groundwater use, but per our initial claims, approximately 36% of our claim was for lost groundwater in Butte and Anaconda and Milltown and Rocker and Montana Pole. 39% was for aquatic loss, Silbo Creek and the Clark Fork, and then another 25% was for our terrestrial habitat losses. So the amount of monies that we're spending are equivalent to the amount of the resources that were part of our claim. And as we justified our claim and came up to those percentages, groundwater was only 33%. We spent quite a bit more than that, frankly.
That has nothing to do with remediation versus restoration. Not one damn thing. And you keep coming back to that, and if you go down, the only reason the state won that suit was because of the loss of the groundwater in Butte and Anaconda.
Well, I guess we could argue that for quite a while.
Yeah,
we can argue that. We spent $7 million up there, plus whatever that last piece cost us. We spent $15 million on the spotted dog. At the request of the governor, we bought 2 ranches in the last 2 years. We have been spending an inordinate amount of money on groundwater and replacement of lost resources versus restoring it. And your own documents say restoration trumps replacement of lost resources.
And we've been spending a lot of money on restoration on terrestrial injured areas of Silbo Creek, the Clark Fork River, and the Anaconda.
Not in Butte Area 1. We need to proceed with the discussion, but that's my point.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mick. Bill, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. Do we have any other hands up?
Yes, Chairman, we do. It looks like Mary Price was next. So, Mary, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so a lot of you may not have this on your screens and obviously not on your telephones, but I'm looking at page 8 of the draft environmental assessment decision notice from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and I apologize for the public. This is Mary Price, Salish and Kootenai tribes. So I'm looking at page 8 of the draft environmental assessment decision notice, which is page 28 of everybody's meeting packets, if you want to flip to that page. And I'm looking at the second comment, which addresses Americans with Disabilities Act standards for accesses and trails. And I guess I found the response rather unsatisfactory to this question. And one of the benefits or several of the benefits that we've heard about why this is a good acquisition is that it provides access for wildlife-related recreational use. It's close to Anaconda. It's bisected by a county road, which would facilitate access. And the topography of the site is very flat and accessible. You know, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks does point to that there are some unmaintained trails within the flat grassland meadows that lead to Warm Springs Creek. And they acknowledge that they would be accessible by some as walking trails, but not everybody, people with limited mobility. And I guess what I would like NRDP and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks is to really take a hard look at this issue of providing access for everybody of all abilities to this site, and not just point to the fact that that meeting ADA compliance is not part of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks management goals for wildlife management areas. I just feel like we can do better and that we should do better. And I would really like Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and NRDP to really take a hard look at how to provide access and trail opportunities for people who are in wheelchairs, for example, or have very limited mobility. I really think this site would lend itself to that, and it could become perhaps a model for how to address this issue on other wildlife management areas, but in particular this wildlife management area. And I also think there's benefit to the resource. You know, if you don't provide, you know, I'm thinking a fishing access to Warm Springs Creek from Stumptown Road might be doable. And having that developed access could also mitigate dispersed uses. You know, once this site is opened up, I think you're going to see a lot of dispersed trails develop to the creek for fishing. And if, you know, in other areas, it's been shown that by providing a developed access, it kind of limits that, and would, you know, limiting the damage to the riparian habitat. So I just, you know, I don't want to get it, I wasn't able to go on the field trip, but I would just like NRDP and Fish and Wildlife Service, or excuse me, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to go back and really look at this issue for this particular site. I just think we need to, you know, if we're going to talk about access, we need to make sure that we're addressing access for everybody, and not just the mountain bikers and the people who are riding horses, but everybody. I think to do less is not equitable, and it's really not, you know, we're not including everybody to enjoy this site. I think it's a great acquisition. I'm going to support it, but I would really like to see this issue addressed in some way that will provide access for everybody. And thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Miranda, do we have some more comments, I think?
Yes, we do. It looks like Jackie Lavelle is the next for comments. So Jackie, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yes, this is Jackie Lavelle. Thank you for the presentation, and Greg, thank you for the field trip on Monday. I agree with Maureen. It's a beautiful, beautiful property, and I guess the questions I have are kind of maybe directed towards FWP in what happens if the advisory council votes to approve this, because I always worry about what happens in the management once somebody gets ownership of the land. And one of the things that occurs to me is the long-term maintenance. You know, it looks like big open space now, and I agree with Mary Price's suggestions of thinking about accessibility and access, but that also requires long-term maintenance funds. And I'm just wondering what FWP has set aside for that. So that's my first question. And then the second question is about the winter restrictions, because I know this is an acquisition primarily for elk habitat. And I was thinking about that as we were walking around, and it was such a beautiful day. If the winter restrictions were in place, we wouldn't have been allowed to walk around there. And that, to me, does not seem right. We didn't see any elk that were there, and I don't know that pedestrian access would interfere with the elk being there, but that also concerns me, because you know that's taking that land out of public access. So I will mute myself again and wait for response.
Greg, do you have a response, please?
Yeah, a quick response, Bill, and then I would not be surprised if Martin Balukas is one of the people that has his hands raised. But we are part of this funding recommendation is $80,000 for short-term, maintenance over the next, 5, 6, 7 years, like we did at Spotted Dog. And then as far as the winter, getting on there in the winter, I think Martin could definitely discuss that as well. But that definitely has to do with their management of game, big game in that area, and they found that's the best way to do it. So I'll reserve that one for Martin, and let other people continue on. I don't know if Martin's next or
not. Greg, I don't believe we're technically taking public comment, but if you're wanting Martin to answer Jacqueline's question, I can unmute him to answer her question, if that's what you're asking for. Greg, if you're trying to respond,
please do.
Okay. So Martin, go ahead and you can respond to Jackie's question.
Sure. This is Martin Balukas, and I'm a land agent with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. There's also a biologist on the call that might have further insight as well. Number one, I want to be clear that FWP would like to maintain this as part of the Garrity Mountain Wildlife Management Area, but that is not just for elk winter range. There are portions of the property, namely the stuff to the south of the road, that are probably important for elk winter range. The diverse riparian habitats on the north side of the road have their own values and species that are, there might be elk there, but there are many other things as well. So in terms of management, the present plan, which I believe is delineated in our EA, is that the south side of the road would be closed contemporaneous with the rest of the wildlife management area from December 1st to May 15th. I can't speak to the research associated with it, but I can tell you anecdotally that, if you have people walking around, there are elk out there on the flat you can see from Anaconda right now every evening. And if people walk up through there, those elk move away. Is that deleterious to the elk? I don't know at this time of year, but certainly in colder weather with deeper snow, constant disturbance is a problem. The other side of the road, meaning the flat north side of the road that is mostly riparian, that the plan would be to have that open year-round for public access. And what that access looks like, I don't think there have been some discussions that in terms of FWP obviously manages people and it manages wildlife, and those are sometimes two difficult things to reconcile. Tori might be able to speak to this, but I believe some of that $80,000 startup fund request would be to try and channel some of that use both north and south of the road, whether that's through fencing a parking area or that kind of thing. That's what that's for. It is not for ongoing maintenance. So if that, I may not have answered it to your satisfaction, but I think that's what I can offer about the management, is that the south side would be managed in concert with the rest of the WMA, which is, and large part of that in the winter, wildlife winter range is probably its highest purpose rather than recreation. But the rest of the year, it's from May 15th to December 1st, it's fully open, and the other side of the road would be open year round. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It looks like Jim Davison is next. So Jim, go ahead.
I have real mixed feelings, and this is more of a comment. This is absolutely beautiful property. And when I'm looking to see how do the kids, particularly the kids in that area from Mountain View and the neighboring subdivision, how much they use it now. I don't think they use it all that much, and how much people go up there. From a development standpoint, when I take a look at the consent decree that is now going through process, where Anaconda and Deer Lodge County can develop, it's going to be through the West Valley, and that's the only areas, because of what's been left and how remediation is going to happen throughout the rest of the valley. That's where development will come, and I have such mixed emotions of locking up land that the community might need for development when we have to balance off all of our issues out there. I think that's pressing a little bit why Fish, Wildlife, and Parks are looking at it. I know our county commissioners sent in a support letter based on use for wildlife, but I don't think they brought in the thought of where we're developing into the future. So I have real mixed emotions on spending this amount of money and locking up property forever.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. Is there anyone else?
Yes. Greg, can you remind me, Tori Ritter has their hand raised. I just don't know, is that one of the, someone from FWP that could answer some questions, or, because we're not taking public comment at this time. So.
Correct, that is correct.
Okay, so I should go ahead and unmute Tori Ritter then.
Please.
Okay. Tori, go ahead.
Hey, this is Tori Ritter. I'm a non-game wildlife biologist with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and I also work on lands projects. Martin pretty much covered it, but I just wanted to clarify something about winter range. I know it does seem odd to be out there on a sunny, bright April day and realize that you wouldn't be able to do that under our ownership. Winter range, that term is a little bit misleading sometimes, because the really critical point for elk and deer coming out of winter is not necessarily when the snow is still on the ground and when the ground is still frozen. There's sort of a delay in them recovering their sort of fitness and fat reserves that extends into March and April. So those lower elevation open grassland areas, that's where that green vegetation really starts coming up first. And so that's actually the most critical time for those animals coming out of winter to have that green vegetation. And especially in years that are worse snow years than this, they may still be stuck down in those lower elevations much further into the spring. So I just wanted to clarify that about the winter range thing. And then I did just want to make sure everyone aware that this land is currently privately owned by a private individual, and that individual was subdividing the property sort of when this came to our attention. So the public is not losing access to this ground at all. They're gaining access that they wouldn't have had otherwise unless they knew the landowner and knew how to get hold of that landowner. So although it is closed for portions of the year to protect those wintering elk as they're transitioning into the calving season, overall, this is greatly increasing public access to those lands. So those were my 2 points of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Chairman, it looks like Mick Ringsack has another comment or question.
That's, please, go ahead, please.
Okay, Mick, go ahead.
I have a question for Martin, and my question is, how much money is there currently in the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Habitat Montana, and Fish and Wildlife Conservation Trust Fund?
Martin, if you have a response for him, could I have you raise your hand again? Okay, Martin, go ahead.
Sure, this is Martin Balukas again. I cannot speak to the amount of money that is there. What I do know is that each year through a wildlife, there are many, many more projects seeking funding than we have in Habitat Montana funding. And so nearly all projects are funded through a combination of outside sources, some of that Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, NRDP, et cetera. And then Habitat Montana is used as the match or is used as a portion of it. And all the Habitat Montana funding that we have in the bank is allocated to ongoing projects. As you can imagine, these projects take several years often. And so I don't know, there is money, it is all allocated. And then we have a round of projects coming up in June, wherein we will allocate this year. So that's how it works. I can't speak to what's in the bank.
Thank you. My comment is that I think you guys come to us way too often to get your matching funds. I think there are other places you should and could be getting them. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the proposed funding?
Bill, it looks like Maureen has raised her hand.
Go ahead, please.
Maureen, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Maureen Connor with the Advisory Council, and I move that the Advisory Council recommend to the Trustee Council that this Stumptown acquisition be approved. Oh, with the funding recommendation as described at this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second, please?
Bill, it looks like Jacqueline Lavelle has raised her hand.
That's fine, please.
Jackie, go ahead.
I will second the motion.
Okay. Okay, so with that, I would turn, is there any public comment at this point? If so, please raise your hand.
Bill, it looks like there may be some more comments or something from a few AC members.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Mary Price, go ahead.
I would like to amend the motion to include the condition that NRDP and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks consider trail and access development compliant with ADA standards.
Okay, so the original motion is Maureen's. Do you accept that proposed amendment, Maureen?
Consider that to be friendly.
Yes.
So yes.
And Jackie, do you will you agree with that as the seconder of that particular motion?
Jackie, go ahead.
I concur with the addition. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other comment from the council? Otherwise, we'll turn to, Sue Peterson, I see.
Yep. Sue, go ahead.
I had just wanted to second the motion, so.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, any members of the public, please raise your hand if you have comments.
I'm not seeing any, but as a reminder for those on the phone, if you want to make a comment, you can press *9 to raise your hand.
And we also have 4 written comments that I will read when it's appropriate.
I'm not seeing any comments from the public right now. So Catherine, you can go ahead and read those written comments we received.
Okay, Catherine Hausrath reading our first comment from David Stone with the Anaconda Sportsman's Club. We, the Anaconda Sportsman Club, fully support the funding for the acquisition of the Stumptown parcel, as this parcel is right outside of Anaconda and could be used by many. Although also this parcel would fill in the Garrity Wildlife Management Area, rounding out the boundary. It would also include a portion of the Warm Springs Creek that is not currently accessible to the public. There are numerous species of birds and grouse here, and most important, it contains 2 meadows that are crucial to elk calving. Access is established already as it borders a county road. This purchase would be a win-win for sportsmen and wildlife. Okay, that's the end of the first comment. The second written comment is from the Clark Fork Coalition, Karen Knutson on behalf of the Clark Fork Coalition. The Clark Fork Coalition enthusiastically supports the proposed 600-acre addition to the Garrity Mountain Wildlife Management Area. Warm Springs Creek is key to the overall health of the Clark Fork River and its fishery. This stream is the last bull trout stronghold in the upper Clark Fork Basin, and its headwaters are some of the most pristine in the entire Clark Fork Basin. By acquiring and adding this property to the Garrity Mountain Wildlife Management Area, the state will be giving a tremendous boost to the work to protect critical bull trout habitat in the upper Clark Fork. The fishery of the upper Clark Fork is stressed, and projects like the Stumptown addition that preserve key habitats will be essential to sustaining and recovering native trout populations. It's important to note that numerous and diverse partner groups, agencies, and stakeholders representing a broad local and regional conservation network came together to develop this project. These types of collaborations can lead to innovative restoration solutions, which is increasingly important in the work to tip this headwaters reach of the Clark Fork towards long-term ecosystem health and community vitality. All right, I will now read the third written comment. It is from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. All right. Thank you for considering this exciting project opportunity and partnership. I would like to thank Greg Mullen, Doug Martin, and NRDP staff for preparing this presentation, along with Julie Gola, Tori Ritter, Martin Balukas, and other FWP Region 2 staff. The NRDP, FWP, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and USFS have a long history of conservation, and if you will recall the 32,000-acre watershed project we completed together in early 2002 resulted in the creation of the Garrity Wildlife Management Area and would not have been possible without NRDP support. The benefits to our natural resources and the public from those historic actions are impossible to measure and still enjoyed today. It only seems appropriate and historic again to be considering this new addition to the Garrity WMA. I want to thank the willing landowners, Ray and Roberta Dvorak, for their vision and patience through this process and giving us a chance to conserve their family lands. Due to the property location and imminent threat of subdivision that was already occurring, the RMEF moved fast, working with the Dvorak family to complete a purchase option with a non-refundable option payment, giving us this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. As the video shows better than words, this high-priority, diverse landscape consists of outstanding, healthy wildlife, fish, aquatic, and riparian habitats that we can conserve and put into public ownership together. Warm Springs Creek will provide new opportunities for families in the next generation to enjoy the outdoors. If we can complete this project with your support, we will be able to increase the size of Garrity WMA by 6%, improving public recreational opportunities to fish, hike, hunt, watch wildlife, and enjoy this open space and view for years to come. To not act on this opportunity would result in the loss of the conservation and public access benefits forever and further risk negatively impacting existing public lands. RMEEF has received overwhelming support for this project, and we are pleased the County Commission supported the project along with many other conservation groups and citizens. We ask for your support for this project and look forward to completing the project in the near future and celebrating with you. Thank you, and I am available for any questions. All right, our fourth and final written comment is from Montana Trout Unlimited. Thank you for the opportunity to offer support for an important issue under your consideration. Montana Trout Unlimited and Trout Unlimited wish to go on public record supporting the acquisition of the Stumptown addition to Garrity Mountain Wildlife Management Area, Stumptown, and we ask for a positive recommendation from the council in supporting the use of funds from the Upper Clark Fork River Basin Restoration Fund to complete the purchase. The reasons to support the Stumptown acquisition are many, but we wish to speak directly to the value to fisheries that this project offers. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has completed extensive analysis in its supporting documentation that helps inform your decision, including demonstration of the accrued fisheries benefits that will be derived from this acquisition. We thank them for their work, and we hope that it helps inform the collective story that these investments will make to the overall restoration success throughout the Upper Clark Fork. As we all know, the continued efforts to restore cold, clean, connected, and complex waterways in the Upper Clark Fork River Basin are an essential component in that mission. Montana Trout Unlimited and TU believe that Stumptown is a valuable property to that end and stand in support of the project and its acquisition. Again, thank you for the opportunity to provide comment. We urge a positive recommendation for this acquisition to move forward today. Please do not hesitate to contact us with any questions or if you need additional information regarding our support for the acquisition of the Stumptown property. Submitted by Clayton Elliott on behalf of Montana Trout Unlimited and Casey Hackathorn on behalf of Trout Unlimited. And that is the end of our written comments.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? Seeing none, I'm calling the question on myself. So go ahead. Can you read the voting, please, Miranda?
Okay. So I'll just go in the same order I did with the last one. Jacqueline, if I could have you raise your hand to submit your vote. Jacqueline, go ahead.
I vote in favor.
Okay, thank you. So next is Mary Price. Mary, could I have you raise your hand? Thank you. Go ahead, Mary.
Yes, I vote in favor of the motion.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Next is Maggie Schmidt. Maggie, go ahead.
I vote in favor.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Kay. Kay, go ahead.
This is Kay. I'm voting in favor of the recommendation.
Thank you, Kay. Next is Jim Davison.
I vote no.
Thank you, Jim. Did everybody hear that vote, Jim? I think you may have been partially cut off.
I voted no.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Jim Cambich is next. If I could have you raise your hand, Jim Cambich. Jim, are you also on your phone? Okay, there we go. Jim, go ahead.
Hello, are you there?
Yep, I can hear you now.
I vote no.
Okay, thank you. Mick, you are next. Go ahead, Mick.
I vote no.
Okay, thank you, Mick. Next is Sue Peterson. Sue, if you're still on, could I have you raise your hand for your vote? Oh, there you are. Go ahead, Sue.
Sue Peterson, I vote in favor.
Okay, thank you. Next is Maureen. Go ahead, Maureen.
Maureen Connor, I vote in favor of the motion.
Thank you. And Bill, you are the last to vote.
I vote in favor.
Okay. So that is everybody's vote. I think it seems like we had a 3 against.
Correct.
So Bill, if I could just have you, I'm not sure if that's.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was
Yep.
off in it. So the motion carries. Okay. From an agenda point of view, I think that is the last official agenda item. At this point, before we adjourn, are there any other public comments from anyone on issues that were not already addressed at the meeting?
Bill, it
Maureen.
looks like Maureen has a. Maureen, go ahead.
Thank you, Miranda, and thank you, Bill. I wanted to bring up something that, and I think what I'm requesting with the chairman's permission is that we put this on as an item for next agenda or our next meeting. But I'm proposing that the advisory council consider making a recommendation to NRDP staff that future acquisitions would be or sought or considered more in the injured area in the future. And I do have one. So just to repeat that, I'm proposing that the advisory council consider making a recommendation to NRDP staff that future acquisitions occur more in the injured area. And I do have one exception to that, which I feel like I need to talk about. And hopefully this makes sense to people, but there is an area that was kicked around a number of years ago, and it's pretty close to this area, and it's called Hearst Lake. And if I'm correct in a brief description, it's way up high, and Anaconda has some interest in that area because of some potential water. Anyway, that would be the one that's coming to mind as a possible exception to my proposed consideration for this meeting, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Anybody else?
I do not see any further comments.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
As a reminder, you'll have to raise your hand again if you motion to adjourn. It looks like Mick has a motion. So Mick, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, but I also would like to ensure that the minority opinion is in the report to the trustee council.
Mick, let me assure you that when there is any controversy whatsoever among the council members, that I do my best to report all the pros and cons, and I hope you can trust me on that.
I've seen you in action on that, so I trust you absolutely.
Thanks, Mick. I appreciate the confidence. And it will be reported in the in our minutes, I presume. But these kind of things, you know, the the trustee council wants to hear all sides of this, obviously, and make an informed decision.
Bill, just to comment on your it being reported in the minutes. So if no one noticed this meeting or recalled Catherine stating that this meeting is being recorded audio and video wise, so it will definitely be captured, everyone's comments.
Yeah, I assume so. But I didn't know whether you did a summary to reduce it to the, instead of a verbatim, that whether you would do it as, whether you would do any kind of summary. It doesn't matter. I think I'm got a pretty good handle on what the debate is. I understand.
I'm sure NRDP will be planning on doing a summary.
Thank you. Okay, do we have a second to the motion?
It looks like Maureen maybe is seconding. Maureen, go ahead.
Yeah, I do think that our trustee Bill does a good job reporting to the rest of the trustee council, so I'm confident that that will happen. And with that, I would like to second the motion to adjourn.
Okay, so I'm gonna say, unless I hear somebody raising their hand and voting no, I'm going to say by acclamation we are adjourned, unless somebody votes no. So unless I see somebody raising their hand to vote no. Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you all. We did okay, I think, for the first time around. Hopefully we won't have, we might have better situation by the fall. So thank you all. I think it worked pretty well. Thanks to Miranda, thanks to Catherine, thanks to all the staff of preparing really good slides to help us understand what's going on.
Yep. Thank you, Bill. We appreciate it.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Goodbye.